Hey guys, so we're out here in the hangar today, and today we're going to talk about the Hercules Miter Saw that we use here in the shop on a pretty much daily basis. Now, the great thing about the Hercules Miter Saw is it is sold by Harbor Freight, but it's completely manufactured by TTI, which, and if you don't know, TTI actually manufactures Milwaukee, Ryobi, Rigid, and some of those other well-known brands that we swear by as craftsmen and DIYers and contractors. But Hercules is also made by those same industries. So let's get into the specs of the saw a little bit. This does run a 15 amp motor. So if you are going to run it into your garage or your shop, straight into the outlet where it's hardwired, no other special attentions needed for it. However, if you are going to run it onto an extension cord like we do here in our shop, you need to make sure you get that 15 amp extension cord, because your normal run-of-the-mill extension cords only run 12 amps, so make sure it's that 15 amp extension cord when you go to buy it. And this is a pretty hefty saw. It does weigh about 55 pounds, so you want to make sure you have either a stand or a cabinet or a table that can support that kind of weight for this saw. You also want to make sure you have the space for it, because this does run a pretty large profile from edge to edge, which is about 35 inches when both fences are extended, and then runs a 20-inch from top to bottom when it's fully upright like you see here, and then 45 inches from front to back when it's the slide is fully pushed back like it is here in this video. So you want to make sure you have at least that much space for the saw to fit itself. And then always you want to make sure you have the space to actually cut the lumber you need to. So your bevel and your miter are pretty much kind of your most important parts of the miter saw, right? It's kind of built into the name, other than maybe the blade, which actually physically makes the cuts. So really neat thing about the Hercules Miter Saw is there is a knob here on the back which loosens the saw to be able to move that bevel around. However, the cool thing is it has a lever that moves back and forth to move that bevel or stop it and not have to mess with that knob at all. So if we have this forward, obviously it's not going to move back left or right because that lever is keeping it from doing that. But if I move this lever out of the way and push it back like that, if I pull this to the right, I'm going to go straight to a 49-degree bevel, which is your highest angle you're going to get. And then push to the left, you're going to get that exact same 49-degree angle that you saw when you pulled it to the right. So go ahead and pull this back up to a 0-degree or a 90-degree cut. Flip that lever back up, and that's going to keep my bevel straight on 90 degrees. So next big thing, obviously, is your miters. This does have 10 miter detents on its angles. So what I mean by detents is that if I twist this knob here on the end, that's going to loosen it, push this lever up, and if I let go of that lever and I keep pushing, it's going to stop at 15 degrees and so on and so forth. And I'll put which angles it stops at in the description below so you can take a look at those. But if I push it all the way to the left, I get a 50-degree miter out of that saw on the left side. And then if I keep going, I pull it all the way to the right, it's a 60-degree miter, which is actually really nice to have when you're cutting kind of some of those weird angles on projects you may be doing. Now, one of the other neat features that the miter detent does have is it has a detent override. So what I mean by that is when, let's say I go past that 15-degree, that first detent, and I want to go to 20, which on this saw is not a detent that's built into the saw. But neat thing is I can twist this knob and it acts like a detent and it will not move and allows you to make that cut at that 20 degrees or whatever angle you may be working with that's not on necessarily a detent. So that's a really, really neat feature. So really cool feature that I've started using a little bit more recently is the light that's on this miter saw and casts a shadow for the actual blade itself to know where exactly you're going to get that cut when you pull that saw down and make that cut. And that's really neat because it allows you to make sure that your line that you've drawn on your piece of lumber is actually going to get cut where you want it cut. Right? And speaking of pulling this down, one thing I do want to touch on before we keep going is this little pin that keeps this saw down like this for either space saving, maybe you need it for a safety feature, you have kids coming in and out of your shop and you don't want them to get hurt with the saw or anything like that. This keeps that blade into the saw base to where they're not going to get hurt by it or anything like that. But we'll go ahead and pull this back up so I can show you where my next little feature that I really, really enjoy is. It's called the crosscut. Crosscut capacity is 14 inches on this particular saw, which comes from the sliding component that you see right here. So when I pull this all the way out like this, go all the way back, that gives me that 14-inch cut capacity that I really like having, especially if you're working with plywood that's a little bit wider, or a butcher block, which I actually did a couple of weeks ago when I was doing a particular project. So it does come in very handy. And then from this base of the saw up to the blade is going to be about 6 3/4 is going to be your max height you're going to cut with it. So you can cut 2x4s on their side, you can cut 4x4s, even up to a 2x6 pretty easily on this saw on its side. So you have lots of options you can do with the height of the saw. Now, speaking of the blade, it does run a 60 tooth right out of the box and runs a 12-inch blade that it comes with. So if you do want to replace it, it's a 12-inch blade. Make sure you get that 12-inch blade to replace it with. And if you want to get a 80 tooth or 100 tooth for a little bit finer finish than the 60 tooth it comes with, just make sure you keep that in mind. And so undoubtedly, some of you have noticed the stand that I have it on. It does not come with the stand. However, Hercules does make their own saw stand. And I will put the link to that in the description later on, down below on this video. So we see all of the great features that Hercules does have to offer on this particular saw. One thing that I've noticed that I don't particularly always like is the dust collection, but here at Open Hanger Workshop, we're plain crazy for sawdust, so it doesn't really bother us too much when the sawdust kind of gets everywhere. We embrace it, we like it. But if you are somebody who doesn't really like sawdust everywhere and kind of wants to keep it contained, don't necessarily overlook it, because there are other ways to collect that sawdust other than just that dust collection point that is actually on the saw. So over time, I've seen this miter saw go from making things like that I've messed up on, like crooked cornhole boards, all the way to things I just finished actually with these very tight miters you can see right here on a beautiful frame we're currently working on for a very good friend of ours. And later on, I may make a video based on kind of what the response we see on how to cover up those miters, but I do like seeing them based on how tight they are. So one of the other cons I've noticed is that the base plate that the saw comes with is not a zero clearance, and so which is going to cause some fraying on the end of your cuts. You can definitely build one, which is what I'll be doing actually over the New Year's break. And I will, I'll show that to y'all and make sure I put it in and do another review with that piece in there. So definitely take a look at that. Most saws don't come with a zero clearance anyway, so it's not a huge con to getting this saw or anything like that. Just make sure you build one yourself later on. So from all of us here at Open Hanger Workshop, don't forget to like the video, comment down below, and subscribe to our channel to see more things coming out of the hanger. And after the new year, we'll be building some cool things, so don't forget to watch those as well. Hey everybody, so this is Andrew from Open Hanger Workshop, and in this portion of the video, I wanted to show you some more close-up shots of things you didn't get to see close-ups of in the video, but I did touch on them and wanted to be able to show you those. And so in this first photo, you see the base plate that I talked about, that it doesn't have that zero clearance like I talked about in the video. And you definitely want to go back and cut your own zero clearance base plate for this saw, which I'll be doing actually coming up here shortly. And I'll be posting a reel or a YouTube video about that, so stay tuned for that as well. Here you see the little indentions that I talked about in the video where your miter saw will actually detent at particular angles. So I want to show you a little bit of a closer up shot of those angles that you see that I talked about in the video, so you can get a better picture of what I was talking about in that part of the video. So we see here the bevel I was talking about in that video, where you have the indicator for your angles as well as being able to see a very precise angle at which you want to be at. It does have those very close up angles, as well as being able to see, you're obviously every 5 or 15, whatever you may need to see on that particular angle indicator for your bevel. This is the rotation knob that I was talking about for your bevel, that you don't necessarily have to screw and unscrew to use the bevel, as well as using that lever I talked about, being able to just move that back and forth to be able to bevel and unbevel or keep it in place when you need to, versus messing with that knob that you don't always necessarily need to, or it makes it a little bit more of a hassle. Right here is the shadow line that I talked about a little bit. One of my favorite features, it allows me to be able to see that exactly where that cut's going to happen, and allows me to be exactly on my line that I've measured. Really cool feature that I really wanted to show close up and let you be able to see exactly what I was talking about in the video earlier on when I touched on that. That's all we've got for this tool review from Open Hanger Workshop. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more tool reviews coming later.